Hi, Michael.
Hey, Kathy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing good, thanks.
Good to see your face.
Yeah, good to see you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Cathy Cunningham, and I'm the finance editor for the Commercial Observer. It's been my pleasure to be joined today by Michael Magner, who is head of US originations for Natixis. So, Michael, we saw each other last in February, which seems like a long, long time ago now, and the world has certainly changed since then. So, how have the past few months been for you?
So I think the past few months have been it's been a new reality that we had to live through. But I think what we found is that given the way that technology is now, that work from home actually had a different flavor to it. Um,
Hi.
and when you were thinking about going back to the office, it wasn't about going back to work because we all were still working very hard.
Yeah.
But I think it really showed the resiliency that we had, and I think a lot of people across a lot of different companies and industries found that things were still very productive. So we were the same. So we were very connected, very productive, and looking forward to getting back to a new normal. But it was still a good experience for us.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a learning experience, right? We never hadn't really been on any Zoom calls before this all happened. So I think it's, I'm learning about technology for sure. I'm not very tech savvy myself, so certainly a learning experience.
It was, and we definitely had to line ourselves up differently. And I think a lot of collaboration happened because of it.
Right.
Whereas a lot of times we'd sit at our desk or just focus on one thing at a time, whereas this required us to all gather together very frequently, much more than we did even in the office. So
Right.
I thought that was a good experience.
No, for sure. And how's your approach to lending been during this time? Have you been lending? Have you put things on pause? Or what's your general approach been?
I'd say the general approach has been uh, cautious and careful.
Mhm.
I think when it all occurred, we really didn't know exactly what the impact would be. I think all properties, all markets, everything was impacted very differently. So you had to step back a little bit, kind of evaluate it, see who was impacted, what tenants were being impacted, what markets were being impacted. So it was a careful, cautious approach. But the good thing is we came out of it fairly unscathed, and we feel pretty confident about the market going forward.
That's fantastic. And I guess you as a global institution must have had, lessons from different markets as they either reopened or were hit by COVID. Is that correct?
Exactly. So as part of this this activity we had of staying connected, we had global calls every week. So we had our teams in Europe, which included teams in Frankfurt, Milan, Paris. We had our team in Hong Kong, and us here in the U.S. So we all started sharing experiences of what it was like opening up, what were the impacts you were seeing, what were some of the positive things that were going on, and how to adjust to that. So each of us could learn a little bit, and it was a good experience. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Really interesting time for me as well as a reporter to report through this. So before I go any further, I should mention that if anybody watching this webinar today wants to ask any questions of Michael, please feel very free to do so. There's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, so just please ask any questions there, and Michael will address as many as possible. So the subject of this webinar is green financing, which we also talked about in February when we met with your entire team. It was a great discussion for me and I actually learned a lot. So obviously this is a trend that's kind of growing in the US and it really kind of came from European investor demand in terms of increased allocations towards green product, demand for green financing. So maybe you can talk us through Natixis' history on the green side.
Sure, Kathy, and thank you. It's we think it's very timely right now. And you hit the nail right on the head. The U.S. has definitely been lagging behind in green loan, green mortgage financing. Just to give you some example, we think looking at it globally, 68% of that market has actually come from APAC, Asia Pacific. I think about 32% from Europe and 0.4% in the U.S. So we've got some room to grow.
And why is that? Just off the top of yeah, well, why is that there's so little in the US?
I think there's just not been the initiative in it. I just think that and I'll hit on a few of those points that I think are going to be more important to people going forward, but I just don't think it's been at the forefront. I think we took an initiative, which I'll explain, that basically we hope spreads through a lot of different markets. The global trend has also been very positive. If you look at globally, it was like 264 million of green mortgage financings in 2016. 2019, we're now up to 7.7 billion.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was really geometric. And I think year to date, we saw some stats that it was 1.5 billion, but again, most of that probably only happened in the first 2 months of the year.
Right.
But yeah, we definitely see that as a growth pattern, and we definitely want to help bring this initiative to the U.S. market and make people think about it more closely. The bank basically was innovative. They started the first green risk weighting factor, which, for folks who understand a little bit about the banking model, was extremely important. So for financings across all sectors, the bank had come up with a methodology that they had created that, based upon the inputs of the transaction, whether it's a real estate deal or infrastructure deal, those inputs would give you a gradient of shades of green or brown. And depending on the shade that you reached, it could have, as a green factor, a positive adjustment to your risk weighting factor.
Yeah.
What does that mean for a borrower? That means that if given a neutral deal, the spread could be X. Given a shade of green, could mean it's X minus. So what that translates into is a positive adjustment to their spread, or I should say a negative adjustment if they're looking for a downward adjustment to the spread.
Right.
And we think that's an important factor, because that seems to be a lot of what weighs on the U.S. market's mind, is kind of what's in it for me.
For sure. Yeah.
Um, but we think there's a lot of other benefits to it. We think that if you're a U.S. Investor, owner, operator, by doing a green loan and having that, if you have all those factors in it, it's not that difficult to create the green loan. It's just an extension of your already sustainable platform. So if your building is green, then why not take advantage of the green loan? It helps extend that communication benefit to the building. It also gives you a little bit of a halo effect.
Right.
Like, I am thinking green, this is the way I'm thinking, and we think that's kind of an important part of it.
So what are some of the key components of a green loan? What really goes into, if any borrowers are watching this and saying, how do I get this green financing? What are some of the key things you'd be looking at?
So some of the key things are the carbon emissions. That's a very, very important driver, and that kind of leads to what also would be important for owners and operators, is that many local jurisdictions are now imposing a decarbonization footprint. We've seen that in New York. I believe there's a local law 97 that passed that is going to target some decarbonization thresholds, I think through 2030 and 2050. I think by 2030 they want to reduce by 40%. And it's actually going to also go right into, by 2025, pick on what they described as the dirtiest buildings, to try to get them more efficient. So carbon emissions is important, but they also weigh in water, air quality, sustainable materials, things like that, that all kind of go into the analysis.
Right.
So we do think that again, with the whole event that we just experienced, that some of those health and safety features can be built into a sustainable platform. Air quality will be extremely important. Upgrading the filtration systems and making it very very state of the art will be important. I think for employees, for tenants, it helps the marketability of your property. So we think those will be interesting factors that come into play.
Absolutely. Now, when we last spoke, I remember you said that you and Arvind, your colleague, Arvind Pyer, currently developing a green certification process. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Right.
Yep, that is correct. So we've got a template that we've worked on so that we can take these inputs fairly quickly. And my colleague Robert White, who runs our U.S. Green Sustainability Hub, have developed. So we can kind of gather this information fairly quickly from the client, put it into an analysis that we can quickly then determine the green viability of it, and hopefully transpose that fairly quickly to the client in terms of pricing adjustment.
That's fantastic. Now, this isn't just New York, right? This is all over the US you're doing this?
This is all over the US, yes, exactly.
Big task.
It is. It's a big task, and it's one that we're very excited about. I think we're also seeing, as we read in the paper, many investors have also made very strong statements about decarbonization,
Right.
ESG, and so this includes, everyone from, pension funds, money managers, endowments. So no matter where they're investing, including in real estate and a lot of real estate investments that they do hold, they're going to be looking at that. So I think the more we can, again, as I describe it, extend that platform, I think the better it is for everybody. It'll be the investor, it'll be the tenant, it'll be the lender, it'll be the owner, and us
The
as
environment.
yeah, exactly. All of us as part of the environment. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And just to go back for a second to your kind of green weighting factor. So depending on an asset's level of sustainability, that will determine also how much capital that particular asset gets, right? From Natixis. You're kind of viewing these assets as much more favorable. Is that correct?
Yes, well, it'll drive. So there's different ways to look at the green aspect of it. So one is the property may actually already be completely green in terms of meeting all the criteria, and that could be a LEED Platinum building, for example, which I think by all standards they meet it. Not all LEED Gold or Silver meet those criteria, but that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is that the client may come to us and say, here's what we're planning to do with our building. It's got an old HVA system. We want to, use a kind of a water catchment system, and we want to recycle the water. We're going to have a waste program that we're going to implement. So if we take all the factors and look at what they want to do in terms of the retrofit, we can then also qualify that as green, although not green today, but we're going to hold them to standards that they do the implementation correctly.
You check up on them after the fact.
Right? Exactly. So we're going to monitor it. We're going to look at their plan and see what they want to do. And if they follow that criteria, then they'll continue to meet the same pricing hurdles that we've offered for being what I call green. If they fail that, then we probably have an adjustment back up because you go back to neutral.
Got it. That makes sense. Now, if you look at New York compared with other markets that Natixis is actively lending in, how is New York faring from a green perspective?
I mean, I'd say it's certainly one of the areas that lags. And I think, yeah, we just look at the number of buildings that have that quality or qualification, and it's been very hard to do it in New York. There are some buildings that meet that standard. We did do our first CMBS green bond loan on a transaction at 85 Broad. So that's getting kind of an old story because there haven't been as many for us to identify. So that's been a while. But I think you see it a lot more, I think, actively pursued in the West Coast. California seems to be a very active market for green type buildings that could qualify.
Great, that sounds about right. Now, to circle back to 85 Broad, this is a transaction I actually covered. This was 2017, and it was you issued the first green CMBS rake tranche, 85 Broad. So this is basically a green CMBS deal with a green tranche in there also. So can you maybe talk our viewers through how this worked, and also maybe the impetus behind issuing at that particular time?
Sure. So it was actually at the confluence of us identifying, our green loan initiative. We hadn't fully rolled out the green risk weighting factor, but we knew that we had to identify these green opportunities. The client on that transaction, Ivanhoe Cambridge, was also very focused on sustainability. When we raised the idea to them, they were very, very supportive and wanted to help us try to think through it. So what we ended up doing to satisfy what we thought were kind of investor demands is we created what you called and identified correctly are these rake bonds, which are basically these bonds that are separated off of the trust and identified only for this building. Because unfortunately, the 85 Broad deal was structured into a full CMBS. So you couldn't offer CMBS green bonds to the investors because it was a pool of 30 or 40 mortgages in there. But what we're able to do is take these rake bonds, tranche them off of the 85 Broad deal only, and place them with investors who had ESG identified capital to buy. And so it was very interesting for them because they bought into the first one, and interesting for us too because we were able to kind of implement this strategy for the first time.
Right, and this is really, a really great investor demand from both domestic investors plus European investors. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I mean that one definitely drove a lot of domestic demand.
Mhm.
At the time, it did not drive pricing any more significantly.
Right.
It was just kind of a new novel thing that we had put out there to the market, but we think over time that liquidity will certainly pick up. I've also heard from a number of people that they believe that buildings that qualify as green also have a lot stronger durability and return profile than non-green. We'll see how that plays out over time, but you would think, given the overall interest in that, both from tenants and investors, that it probably has some of those features that all kind of qualify as positive.
Right, absolutely. So have you replicated the 85 broad structure since then, or are you looking to do that again at some point?
We have not replicated it, unfortunately, but we are looking very actively.
Okay.
Yeah, we have actually several deals in that we're looking at that we believe qualify, and if we and the client can both win the mandate, I think it would be pretty exciting.
Right,
Uh,
absolutely.
and we really love to also see some of these retrofit deals, because I think that'll be a lot more opportunity there. I think the existing deals, there aren't as many,
Okay.
but we think the retrofit will be a very great opportunity for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Michael, what are some of the key lessons that Natixis has taken from Europe in terms of green financing? What are some of the most important things that you think that the US can then perhaps learn from Europe in terms of?
Yeah, I think the thing that we have to do is we've got to do a better job of getting the message out. Um, I think one of the things that we've decided to do in several transactions that we were pursuing is we're willing to take the lead.
Mhm.
And what I mean by the lead is, um, if we've identified the loan as being green and we've identified that we can offer tighter pricing because of our risk adjusted factor, that we're willing to absorb that into the market and then go to the market and show them that this is a green loan, that they would like to buy this paper at slightly tighter spreads,
Mhm.
so that we can hopefully jumpstart this. And I think the more that people do that, I think the more activity you'll start to see in the market, and then investors will start to get more comfortable. Borrowers will start to see it's not that complicated. They've already done all the hard work.
Right.
They've already got their building green, so they did all the hard work. Now it's just a matter of continuing to implement that green policy across a lot of your other kind of strategies, including financing.
Right. And I guess it's a learning process for people that aren't too familiar with how exactly to go about this or the benefits of it. So, yeah.
It is. It is. Certainly, it's there are a number of major developers that are very keen on it, and when you mention it, the light bulbs go right off. And there are other folks who it's just a little bit like, so what does it mean? What's in it for me? What do I have to do? And
Right.
so they may not be as connected to the green concept, but it's just a little bit of an education process, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I was thinking about, is I think Natixis is such an interesting platform because of your global footprint. So I guess, we've spoken in the past about how the mezzanine market in Europe is behind the US, but I guess that, Europe are ahead of us in terms of the green financing, things like that. So there must be so much kind of, just knowledge going back and forth between all your offices.
There is. We definitely have with our global head of real estate, a very global view of things, and we're trying to treat some clients who are global, treat them globally, because they are everywhere, but also trying to learn and understand where investment is coming from, who's active and who's not. And I think that's kept us pretty close on the edge of learning a lot of what's going on in the market. Rather than hearing about it later, we try to think ahead. But yeah, it's
Right.
been great. Yeah, the global footprint for us has been great.
And in terms of foreign investors who are looking at the green space, is there particular countries that they're active in, or they're coming from from Europe to the US in terms of green opportunities?
I would say that huh, I think almost anybody in Europe has a green angle
Right.
and wants to pursue that. I'd say that a number of the Canadian investors are very focused on it as well. That's
Yeah.
everyone from Ivanhoe Cambridge to Brookfield to PSP and others. I think they all have a very strong angle into green. And I think more and more U.S. investors who are raising capital, and they're raising it from the pension funds, endowments, and others, money managers, are also thinking the same thing, because they have a complete decarbonization footprint. It's exactly what they want across
Yeah.
all their investments, right?
Right, absolutely. So I guess it's going to shape things going forward if all these kind of stars align when it comes to investment.
Exactly. And we've certainly spoken to a number of investors, and unfortunately, with the onset of this pandemic, we weren't able to do it. But we were going to set up a number of meetings with investors to show them our green risk weighting factor, how we
Right.
pursued it, and help them understand it a little bit so that they can kind of replicate that across their portfolio. So again, like I said, it's going to be a little bit of an education process,
Yeah.
um, but we're ready to invest the time and effort into it.
Right. So actually, one of my questions, how has business been in terms of, you obviously can't travel, or there's been vastly reduced travel since COVID. So not many people are too keen to get on a plane quite yet. So has that impacted your business at all, or have you just been taking advantage of, Zoom calls, things like that, or how have you been coping with that?
Yeah, the travel's obviously been non-existent for us, but we've had a lot of great calls with a lot of our great brokers that we deal with.
Right.
We hold, I mean, either I'm speaking to them daily or biweekly calls. We share information, we give them input and feedback as to what we're doing, what we're seeing, and we're starting to see the beginnings of activity again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's started to pick up, and I'm very enthused by that. So we're looking forward to hopefully some new business here shortly.
Absolutely. It certainly feels like that even the last couple of weeks, there seems to be more deals happening. Do you think that, investor and lender confidence is returning to the market?
I think so. I think we saw it in the CMBS market.
Mhm.
We saw that activity really picked up, where lenders, just like ourselves, we all had collateral that, as we were describing, and my trader has described as stranded, meaning we couldn't get it out the door because of the market conditions. But with the improvement in the market conditions, we've just seen the spreads and the activity really snap back, and a lot of it says, to investor appetite. They've kind of identified that the assets that you're showing us now have been COVID-19 durable.
Yeah.
The collections have withstood. The assets are still performing very well, and they also don't see much activity for the next 90 to 120 days.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you're an investor sitting there thinking about what I'm going to be doing for the next 90 to 120 days, knowing that it's going to take us the CMBS originators that long to bring the next deal to market, I think it's a great opportunity to take advantage of some of those deals, and hopefully we can capitalize on that with some new originations here going forward.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's a good window now to get in and get into some of these deals at the moment, yeah.
Yeah.
And so the deals that are, I mean, are you finding that obviously industrial is kind of a safe haven asset class right now, multifamily, but what's the general feedback you're getting in terms of the deals that are, attractive at the moment?
Yeah, you hit on two of the ones that I think are the forefront of everybody's mind, right? Industrial, just it was the asset class that everybody liked, but it wasn't as I said to folks, it wasn't the most glamorous or
Right. Sure.
sexiest looking deal in on the front of your cover of your
Right.
prospectus, but and everybody gravitates to the big trophy office buildings, but we definitely see a big uptick there. Have some activity on that already in terms of some deals we're working on. So we're very excited about the industrial. Multifamily has always been a strong performer for us. Been very pleased with some of the performance we've seen with some of our clients on those deals. The office building sector is going to be one to keep an eye on. I think it's just a little bit. I don't see any dramatic, change immediately, but there'll be some shifts, and it'll be shifting around. We hear a lot of dialogue about how it's going to shift. So we're going to keep our eye on that a little bit. Data centers is another area. We've been working on a couple of data centers.
Mhm.
We have an infrastructure team that is very well developed into that sector. So we're working with some data center clients on some construction financings for those type of deals as well.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
yeah, yeah,
We can cover them.
yes, good, love it.
Not to be cheeky. So yeah, thinking about asset types. Not actually, offices think they're really interesting right now, right? Because nobody knows what's going to be the best layout for offices going forwards. I mean, we're an open plan news desk, for Commercial Observer, which I think is a little bit daunting, the thought of going back there. But I guess we don't know whether people are going to want more space so they can spread people out, or less space, or what the ideal situation is going to be, right? So office is kind of harder to kind of think about. And some people are saying, suburban office is going to be particularly appealing because you're away from so many people, and not the elevators often, things like that. But any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're experiencing the same thing, and when you mentioned about the global footprint, we're talking about the same things in Hong Kong and Europe and in the U.S., which is it's the balance between social distancing in the office, um, and the number of people there. So by balancing that, it seems to be evening out to needing the same amount of space approximately. There'll be some I think some changes that have to be made, but I think generally that's what's going on. We definitely hear a lot of dialogue about the hub and spoke concept.
Yeah.
That
It's
seems
a
to be,
buzz term, right?
yeah, as the buzz term. And we hear that a lot of the major firms, all want to keep their hubs,
Right.
but they also want to have some spokes out there into some of the markets. And I think that'll be an interesting, dynamic to see. Again, I think the spoke part of it will not be enormous leases, but I think it'll be interesting to see the genesis of that and how it plays out.
No,
But I
for sure.
agree that you identified a couple of the shifts that we're keeping our eye on.
Yeah, definitely. Now, any key lessons you've taken from other offices, overseas that have reopened already? Anything you're looking at for your own offices?
I would say that a lot of what we're doing is mimicking a lot of what they're doing, and I think it's just trying to keep the social distancing in place, trying to keep capacity limited at the moment.
Yeah.
But I think by and large they've all followed pretty much the same plan, so I don't think we found any surprises out of the reentry so far.
Right. It's interesting, this crisis, to me, because I feel like it's accelerated a lot of trends. I think that, from the retail aspect, obviously, this is kind of like a double whammy for retailers who then were hit with, stores closing, people forced to stay at home. And the industrial sector just seems to have, caught fire, between Amazon. I think every single person, in the world right now is ordering from Amazon. So I feel like, the e-commerce and the industrial sector is just kind of, very, very hot right now. But Natixis is actually lent on a lot of Amazon leased buildings, so you already have a few of them in your portfolio. So good for you.
Yeah, listen, we were fortunate. I think, as I said, we probably weren't in as active into the industrial part of that market,
Yeah,
but definitely the tech part of it we were, and I think it's proved itself to be resilient, which is why we liked either those markets or those assets. And certainly an area that we still want to stay focused on, I think, are those type of deals.
Right, absolutely. Now, before you mentioned, the CMBS market, obviously it kind of paused for a little while when COVID first hit, and then two of your competitors, I don't need to name, came to market with a CMBS deal and kind of test the water, and it's actually very well received by investors. So how are you looking at CMBS today versus balance sheet lending? Because I know you're kind of 50-50, right, in your portfolio.
Yeah, so we had collateral in a deal that got priced, I think, a week and a half ago. So that it did go well. It helped us validate what we thought about the CMBS market and its kind of pricing level. So I think we're going to see ourselves, again, very focused on that market. We like it. We got an excellent distribution team that can basically help us pull this collateral together. So yeah, we're going to be very focused on CMBS. I think it's going to be a great market for us. There's probably a lot of pent up demand. I think that as every time there's a little bit of an adjustment in the market, I think people just have to reset recalibrate their vision of what to expect. But we're pretty excited still about the CMBS market.
Right, great. Yeah, it seems to be a lot of more activity recently, and like you see a lot of pent up demand for CMBS. So that's fantastic.
Yep.
And Mike, given that there's obviously nobody expected the downturn to be caused by a pandemic, and now there's still so much uncertainty, I feel, in terms of where do we go from here? Obviously, a lot of states are spiking now, number of cases. We don't think there's going to be a second resurgence in the fall. So how are you approaching the rest of 2020 in terms of your comfort in lending on assets, or are you going to really take it deal by deal?
I would say it's definitely deal by deal, but I do think we're asking about the uh, we're certainly asking all the owners and investors when we're looking at a deal. We want to see what the rent collections were. Um,
Right.
and I think that's the key. And it kind of reminds me of the global financial crisis when you went back and you would ask a client, okay, so how did you perform in '09, 10, and 11? And if you saw the right trends, you'd go, oh, that asset was really good. So this is obviously a shorter time frame, but I think when you go back and you look at, March, April, May collections, now June collections, that even these, whether it's a spike or a second wave, will give you
Yeah.
good indication of how well this property is still going to perform through that environment.
Right.
Um, so that's why I think it's still a great opportunity. There's still a number of assets that have done extremely well through this environment, and I think we'll just focus on it deal by deal.
Right. So I think it's so interesting again, also because I mean, with the global financial crisis, obviously there was more of a run up and people kind of felt it building. And I think every time I've spoken with you in the past, we've kind of talked about what might cause the next downturn, but obviously nobody expected COVID. But this is such a short, compressed timelines when the actual, everything kind of fell apart. So I think people were kind of, caught off, not caught off guard, but pretty much caught off guards and had no time to prepare. So very different kind of crisis, right?
Completely different. Everyone, and I think as we all learn, every crisis is different. So this one, yeah, this one definitely caught us completely off guard.
Right, absolutely. Now, in terms of markets, I know that you're really active in, Pacific Northwest as well as really all across the US. But are you viewing certain markets differently in terms of how they're faring during COVID, or how are you looking at, markets today?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think we're gonna keep an eye on is you're right, because we were probably more active in Pacific Northwest, California, Boston, New York, Washington corridor. I think the Southeast, Southwest will be interesting markets to keep our eye on.
Yeah.
They've always had the right demographics. I think we probably will think about putting some resources into those markets and think about them a little bit more carefully, because I think there'll be some good opportunity there. I think there's opportunity all around, but I think it's probably an area where we didn't focus on as much, but I can see a lot happening there already.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, how do you think the banks have fared this time around as opposed to the debt funds and alternative lenders? It seems to be that the banks have been kind of consistently, in the market this time.
I think so. I think that the great thing is that this was not a financial crisis. So um, as we were talking to a lot of clients, I said to them, fortunately or unfortunately, in 2009, if I were calling you, I was probably calling you to ask you to pay me off,
Right.
because I needed capital and we were trying to survive. But here, the call was, so how you doing? How are your collections? What's going on? Is everybody healthy? And I think all the banks have had the same reaction in the market. They all came out of this, I think, really well. And the banks will lead us back out of this, I think, because we're all pretty healthy, I think.
Right, absolutely. And I think you and I, tell me if I'm wrong, but this rings a bell. I think we had a discussion at the start of COVID where the whole borrower-lender relationship seems very different this time around. I feel like, lenders are far more understanding, and because, like you said, this was nobody's fault, right? It was nobody, not due to greed or any kind of fraud or anything like that. It was, a pandemic, and it affects many people's health. So I feel like the lender-borrower relationship has also been, much kind of gentler this time around.
It is, and I think the regulators also gave the banks some flexibility and leeway to handle this issue, so that we didn't feel like we were being scolded for the issue. As you just said, it wasn't our fault. They
Yeah.
realized the situation, so we could walk into a client and talk about a forbearance or an issue with their tenant without feeling like, we also have to pursue remedies and I've got to get myself ready for a litigation. I think everything just worked out very well and very amicably. So I
Yeah, which
think
is nice. You can't often say that in a crisis. So
not at all, not usually. No, that one worked out well.
yeah. So I can do a couple of questions here. Does the Natixis do any PACE financing or allow PACE financing on properties where they are the senior lender?
That's a good question. Yeah, so commercial PACE has been a topic that we're discussing, and it's a very niche market, And what we find is that there are a number of lenders, investors who can identify that, because a lot of the PACE programs, which is really this environmental lending program, are very small. So the PACE loans can be anywhere from 2 to 8 million, maybe 10 million, as big as I can understand. There's not a lot of volume to it, but there are a lot of lenders that are looking at this, specialty lenders that do this. And then we're looking at possibly providing that type of lender some type of facility
Oh,
that helps them aggregate up, because the idea is to collect all these what they call CPACE,
mhm.
commercial PACE loans, into a facility that you could then securitize. So the short answer is we're not active in the CPACE, but we're watching it develop, and I think there'll be a lot more activity there to hopefully launch into green, and it helps us kind of attach ourselves to a green opportunity as well.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting. So you think that might be something for this year or next year, or what's your general sense?
I think there's a couple of investors talking about it now, and it could. I think it's happening now. Whether we can find the right lender investor to team up with will be a question, but I think it's pretty interesting.
Right.
Um, I think part of it will be, again, it's a size issue, it's a volume issue. Much like we're struggling to get, you know, our own green loans. I think the CPACE programs are also doing the same. But I
Right.
think, as I said, with the whole retrofit coming their way, I think that could be a bigger business.
Right. For sure. And Texas seems to be kind of leading the way in the green side, but are there many other lenders that are either as active or are getting into the space kind of aggressively on the green side?
I think so. I think there's a number of particularly the French and European banks who
Hmm.
have this at the forefront of their policy. I think the U.S. banks are catching up a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, what we're trying to do is make sure that everybody's kind of holding themselves to what we think are the green loan principles. So these are kind of like standards that have been developed across the market. And what we want to make sure is that other entrants that come into it don't kind of what we call greenwash, which means, I kind of just wash it with green to make you
Right.
pretend, because I believe you upgraded something, so therefore I want to call this a green loan, and I want
Yeah.
everybody to give me benefit for it. But in actuality, you didn't really meet all the principles. So I'd say the European banks are leading it, and I think you'll see the U.S. banks follow.
Right. And is that is that part of the green certification process where you're basically checking all these things, double checking that everything is as it should be? Is that part of that?
So yeah, so what we have is what you'll see and occurs on almost all the green transactions is you get a second party opinion from
Okay.
a what they call an ESG specialist, and we have a couple that we work with that we're having, hopefully getting one to sign up an agreement with, where they actually provide the second party opinion and go, look at the Tixis, did the review. We actually certify that this met all the green loan principles. Um, so it's not a ongoing rating per se, but it is at least a validation by a second party opinion. We think is very important to have.
Wow, that's fantastic. So is this certification process now developed, but so everything's up and running in terms of this process, right?
Yep, this process is up and running. We are actively looking at the deals that are coming in,
Brilliant.
screening them very quickly to see whether they meet green loan standards, and if they do, then we start to develop, how we might adjust pricing from our risk weighting factor.
Right.
Um, so we'd like to start seeing more of those deals. Like you and I were just discussing, I hope the market will start picking up for it. I think a lot of investors will start to identify in this market that there's probably an opportunity.
Right. It seems to be a good time as well to perhaps like reassess your property at the moment as well, because they've been empty for so long. Going back, changes are being made anyway, some of the buildings. So, it seems like maybe a good time to make some changes.
I think so, and I think it definitely it helps that now they can kind of step back and look at it a little bit differently, and um, just knowing what tenants want and need, ask themselves what's the cost benefit. So if I don't do this, what could I potentially get in rent or tenants that I might lose if I don't have this type of air quality features or sustainability features within my building or health standards within my building. So I
Yeah.
think it's going to be a very strong investment thesis for many owner operators going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, what's been the biggest challenge for you during COVID, do you think, from a business perspective?
I would say the biggest challenge was trying to get my arms around everything that had actually just happened. Like you said, it just came to a complete halt.
Right?
And much of my enthusiasm be the greatest opportunity. We can jump into the market, and as we step back from a risk perspective, as I said, some of the things we started learning, question whether or not that would be the type of deal to pursue. And so, like I said, did we know the collections? Did we know what was going on with the tenants? Were they asking for forbearance? Um, what would be the depth and length of this situation? So it did require me to hit pause a little bit, reevaluate, and I think internally we did the smart thing and the right thing. So our reentry will be right on top of the market, I think.
That's good. Yeah, definitely. I agree that definitely it seemed to come out of nowhere. And I think everybody was kind of like trying to think on their feet and just to, to get things rolling again, for sure.
We're all anxious now. Yeah, we're all anxious. Yeah.
Exactly. Definitely interesting time. And especially, I know you have dogs, like I have a dog, so that's been an interesting time for me also. When my dog's featuring on Zoom as Bark sometimes, but the whole just working from home concept, if you've got kids or pets or anything else, is also kind of an added, layer to layer to all this.
So far I've been thinking the same thing. I'm like, this is going to either have, as you said, somebody deliver something to my
Oh
front
yeah,
door,
yeah, been
or
there.
all four of my dogs will start barking, and you'll think I'm at a zoo. So uh, so far so good.
Yeah, thank goodness for the mute button. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I also feel, we're such a social industry, so I think it's hard to, not see people in person and do the in-person meetings and things like that. But hopefully that'll come back at some point.
I'm hoping. Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Everybody feels the same way too, from everybody I've spoken to in the industry. So
Right.
yeah, it's definitely a social business, and
Yeah.
it's been a little bit hard, I think, on everyone, but yeah, I'm optimistic now.
Yeah, absolutely. So without a crystal ball, what do you think the rest of this year is going to look like for Natixis? And what's going to be your main focus?
So I think the main focus will be, as we re-enter, just trying to get the message across to people so it's very clear, and precise about what we want to do. I think, given that we've been on pause for, you know, over 90 days now, it is just starting to pick up. So as our business does take, it's a 30 to 60-day cycle from the time you get a deal signed up till you get it closed. I could see this being a very robust late third quarter, fourth quarter year. I think this one, um, we're all going to be running around yeah, to holiday parties and then running back to our desk to work on a closing, because I think we're going to have a busy end of third, full fourth quarter year.
Yeah, that's great. And what's the thing you're most looking forward to in terms of getting back to some kind of sense of normality?
I'd love to be on calls every day, working on deals, closing them. I think that's what I miss the most. It's just managing that closing process, like having something to work on, giving hopefully the client what they need. I think that's been the big part of what we're missing. It's great talking to all the clients and my good friends at the brokerage community, but as much as they do too, we all want to be in the business of closing deals. So that's what I miss the most.
Absolutely. And if you close the deals, I can write about them too. So
Exactly. We're going to hopefully keep you busy too. That's our objective.
well, Michael, thank you so much for your time today. This was fantastic. Any final words for our viewers? Anything else you want to make sure that they know about Natixis?
Well, I just want to thank you, Cathy, for letting us kind of present this. I think, hopefully you'll see more and hear more about the green loan financing. I think it's important for us, for the environment, and there couldn't be a better time to take advantage of it. So we're very thankful for you letting us make this presentation today.
Absolutely. And green financing benefits everybody, right? So I think it's obviously a very good place to be. So
I agree. Thank you.
and hopefully I'll see you in person soon, Michael, but it's always a pleasure. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you again, Cathy. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Take
Great.
care.
All right. Bye-bye. Yep. Bye.